In the previous two videos, we discussed everything about Laravel controllers, from simple controllers to resource controllers, and then invocable controllers, and finally the singleton resource controller. In this video, we answer some tricky questions about the controller. Let's start with a simple one. How can you pass data from a controller to a view? Here we have a controller named sample controller. In the index action method, we are rendering the view file sample.blade.php. Say, we want to print the list of users on the view template. Then we do it using the for-each directive. We are printing the username and email. Let's print another variable named custom data for demo purposes. Now, if we load the sample page, we get error because the variables are not defined. To define and pass the values, we have to pass data from the controller. Get list of users using the user model and set some value for the custom data. Now we can pass the data to view in three ways. First one is the most common. In the view helper function call, pass any array of key value pairs. Keys of this array are name of the variable that we will use in the view, and value of the array are the actual values. Here we passing the user data with name users and custom data as custom data. These names should match the name of the variable that we are using in the view. Now load the sample page. Now the view is showing data as we pass the data from view. The second way is to use compact method. By using the compact method, we do not need to pass key value pairs. We just pass the name of the variables, and the compact function will map the provided keys to the variable with the same name. Reload the page, and we get the same result. Third way is to use the with method and pass the key as first param and value as the second. Here, we pass on a variable named extra data. Let's print that in the view file. Reload the page, and we can see the extra data value with the other data. Okay, that was easy. Let's go to the next question. How do you share data with all views from? Generally, when we pass the variables to a view from the controller, it is only shared with that specific view file. We might need to share the data with all views, like logged-in user information, cart data, or any other information. Say we want to share the logged-in user role from a middleware. Here we have a middleware named checkRole. To pass data to all views from here, use the view fusadd and call the share method. Pass the data with name role, and we are passing data admin as role. Let's pass some other data from the same middleware. Now we can print the data to any view file. Apply the middleware to some controller. Load the page, and the data passed from the middleware is showing on the view. We can do the same thing from anywhere, like a service provider. From checking, we are using the share method from the view fusadd and passing the app name. Print it on any view. We can share data this way from a controller or any other place. How do you inject dependencies into a controller? In Laravel, we can inject dependencies into the controller using constructor injection or method injection. The service container of Laravel will automatically resolve the dependencies. For example, let's create a services directory inside the app directory. Our service name is user service. Namespace app, services. And we are using the user model to get all the users. Now, we can inject this service into the controller constructor. Let's define a property using the constructor property promotion and give it the type user service. Now we can use the user service in any action method of our controller. This can be done by defining the user service property in the normal way, without constructor property promotion. Let's call the getAllUser method and get all users in the user service. If we load the page, we can see that all users have loaded correctly. Let's define another method getById, which accepts the parameter ID and returns a single user. Here we are getting the user with ID 1. We can also inject the dependency into a specific action method in case we don't need that service for the whole controller. Just pass the user service to the method, and the service container creates an instance and automatically injects have injected user service. Let's dump it for demo purposes. Define the route. Load the page sample-demo, and we can see the data. We can get the date of the user ID too also. There it is, the data of the second user. There is another way of injecting dependencies. Say we don't want to define a concrete type for the injection, and we want to define the type as an interface. In that case, the service container will not be able to automatically resolve the interface type to the concrete class. Here are have user service interface. And the user service is implementing the interface. Let's inject the user service interface type. Load the page, and it shows a binding resolution exception. The reason is, the service container does not know which instance to provide when we ask for the user service interface. We have to explicitly tell Laravel how to resolve this. Go to any service provider. Here we are using the app service provider. In the register method, use this app bind. Provide the interface name as fastparam and the concrete class, user service, as the second value. Now the service container knows. If we ask for an instance of user service interface, then it has to create an instance of the concrete class, user service. Load the page now, and we get the users. Let's go one step further. In the service, we are using the user model. If we want to, then we can inject an instance of the user model to this service also. Use the constructor property promotion and inject the type of user model. Now we can use this user model in the service class. All these dependencies are resolved by the Laravel service container. How do you return JSON responses from a controller? The process is very simple. Use response.json and pass the data. That will return a JSON response with a proper response header. We can pass any data using the JSON method, a collection or an array. Let's pass an array. Reload, and we get a JSON response. Even better, if we just return an array or collection, Laravel returns a JSON response. You can check the header. Even the header is set properly. Application JSON. Let's return the list of users. There it is, list of users, with a proper response header. How can you organize routes for API controllers? Let's create API resource controller for users. In the index action, return list of users. Register the route. The endpoint is /users. Hit the endpoint AP/users, and we get the response. Note that API prefix is added by default to the AP routes. Now, how can we better organize the API files properly? What we can do is organize the API by version. Create version 1 from the beginning. Create a directory, v1 inside the API directory. Then move the API controllers into it. We have to change the namespace after moving the files. For ease, we will add a prefix v1 to all the routes that belong to version 1 and declare it as a group. Change the namespaces where we are importing the v1 controllers. Now, reload the page. We need to add v1 to the URL. Now reload. There you go. Let's go one step further and completely separate the route file for each version of the API. Create a file API_v1.php and move the v1 route definition to this new file. Fix the imports. In the main AP root file, inside the group, pass the path of the v1 root file. Reload the API/v1/user, and it shows the list properly. The same is true for the single user root. How do you test controller methods in Laravel? Create a test file using php-artisan make test command. Here we are testing the user controller. We are using Pest for testing. To test the user list, call the API endpoint API v1 users. Before that, use the user factory to create some user records. We are creating 5 users here. Then check if the API status is 200 or not. Also check the return data has 5 rows. Refresh the database before running the tests. Import the refresh database. Run the tests. You can see all the tests passed, including the user controller tests. How do you use traits in controllers for reusable logic? We can use the trait normally. There is no need to do anything special. Let's create a directory for traits. Create a trait named Action Logger. This just logs a message to trace which action is called. Set the namespace, app traits. In the controller, use the trait, and call the action logger where needed. Now call the endpoint. And check the log file. There it is. This log is added by the trait. That's all about controllers. In the next video, we are discussing interview questions about requests and validation.